Hello everybody, Soundwave Superior back again with another video. I am going to be reviewing the 35th anniversary Megatron. Now, first impressions of this figure, I think it's pretty good. It's got all of the right colors in, all of the right places, everything. It looks like it just jumped out of a cartoon. Now, there's, the mold for Megatron was pretty good, but I think that this was at, full potential. Because, just taking a look at it here. See from the pose, it's got very good articulation. Kind of a big backpack, but it's forgivable since it's clean. It doesn't look ugly. So, the amount of paint apps on this figure is insane. If they just use half as much paint on this as any other figure, we wouldn't be complaining about anything anymore. More than what's needed to be painted is painted. You got, reflectiveness on the cannon right there. Same thing on the sword. Which, the sword is probably one of the things that I don't really like about this figure. Because, I'm sitting in my chair, I'm getting ready to transform it, and then I realize, oh yeah, that accessory is important for putting it into a tank. I don't know. It's a nice G1 reference, but it didn't even make sense in the original toy, so to me it just makes no sense. Now, getting out of the way, the whole Megatron turning into a tank thing, yeah, it'd be cool if it was a gun, but if we're gonna be honest, it doesn't make any sense. It would have been a lot easier if he was just a tank from the beginning. Pretty early on he was a tank, but, that initial gun thing, people are still hanging on to. Don't get me wrong, I think it's cool to have a Transformer that turns into a gun, but at the same time, it's just not gonna work nowadays. It's not, you can't have it anymore. That's what the Masterpiece figures are. Something, you don't want your kid running around holding a very realistic metal gun that turns into a robot. Orange cap or not, still get into trouble with it. If I ever get one of the Masterpiece Megatron figures, can't bring that thing out in public. It's just the way that things are now, it almost has to turn into the tank. Nevertheless, I am happy that they put some gun details on there. They got, the hammer on his shoulders. You even have, his chest is still the gun, or the top of the gun. And then, of course, this clearly being a scope. You can see it does have, one of the things that I was not so happy about on this figure is, from most images when the figure first came out, it looked very squat and, wide, which looked really weird, and it's perfectly fine in person. I know a lot of you probably already have this mold, one form or another. Now, the only problem with it looking this way is that, it's not really going to fit in with the rest of the Siege characters. Despite the fact that it looks so much like the cartoon, it's not really going to fit in your classic shelf unless majority of your classic shelf isn't Siege, which I wouldn't imagine that it is, because, now we have Siege. And it is nice to see that they were able to do the cell shading without making it look like camouflage. Because, you see some of the statues and stuff that just look so strange because they put way too much on there. I don't have the Optimus Prime. In fact, the closest thing that I have to Classics Optimus Prime, or Optimus Prime for my Classics shelf, is the Galaxy Upgrade Optimus Prime. Because I have picked up none of them so far. But something kind of interesting, the sword the sword makes an appearance in the Siege trailer. Um, but if you look at the sword, it's exactly the same as it is on the toy. Like, let me take this off and show it to you. You see that flat edge right there? He's walking up to Optimus Prime like he thinks he's actually going to be able to cut him with this thing. I mean, they're not made out of tinfoil. This doesn't even make sense in universe. I mean, I don't really know how I feel about the sword, because on one hand it's parts forming, and on the other hand it is kind of a cool reference, I guess. But sometimes it does get in the way. Like, if this sword wasn't there, then in tank mode, the turret would be able to look up and down. Now, bringing in... straighten them out real quick. Get the rest of the group in here. And notice how there's no Starscream, because I have not picked up Earthrise or Siege Starscream, so the reason right now on my classics shelf is just the Furai Model 1, which doesn't really work that well. But he does scale nice with the other figures, you know, but like I said, he still looks a little out of place next to them, just because, you know, it's a cartoon, and then the rest of them look like they could even be in the movies. But scaling is very nice. I like Megatron to be a little bit taller. Bring these guys out of the way. My only other 35th anniversary figure. These figures are very nice just because, you know, paint on them was much better than most other figures. Bringing in the last version of Megatron that I had for my classic shelf. You can definitely tell, you know, this one was going for a more realistic vibe, and of course it was always meant to be Blitzwing. So, you can see even him, he doesn't have the gun chest. I mean, that barely even looks like a scope. So, and of course that one's a headmaster, so they had a little bit more restrictions and stuff, which, I mean, I can forgive. It's mainly, you know, like, which aesthetic do you want for your shelf? More realistic or more, like, cartoon accurate? I know a lot of people are still clinging onto this one, which I can agree with. You know, this is at the point where they were overly complicated and still fun to transform. Siege is more like, you know, it's as simple as it can be with still being fun, and like, all the transformations are intuitive and stuff. So, I don't know, I feel like it depends on what other figures you have on your shelves. I mean, this one, it fits pretty well with a lot of the Siege figures if you don't have this one. And it also fits with older collections, like if a lot of your figures that you have on your classic shelf are from, you know, like 2016, then that would probably work pretty well. So this one is a little bit taller, but all figures from that time were, so it's not that big of a deal. Bring him out of the way. Get Astro Train in there. See, he's a pretty decent size figure. Bringing in this guy. Then my last review. Scrapface. So, he's not, you know, the figures, like, since they're more complicated, they're going to be a little bit smaller, which is fine. You know, because this is more expensive plastic and everything. It's higher quality. But So he'll scale pretty well with a lot of your figures unless you have an Optimus Prime that's taller than him. Mine it's smaller than him by just a little bit, so. And one of the complaints that I have about is the hand right here. I don't know what's wrong with it. It's a little off-putting. I think it's like angled in too much. So it always looks a little bit off when I'm looking at it. Bringing in the face here. See that? Looks very nice. Of course, you got the cell shading on his head too. Looks very good. Nice Decepticon symbol in the middle too. Got a few more little blast nipple things around them. All of them work functionally. I really only use the blast things for like Jetfire, maybe. Another problem with this is this does not tab in. So like when I got mine, its head was like that in the box. You could have at least had like a little nudge or something that would have held it up. But, I mean, at least he has a neck trap door you can put stuff in. But overall, it's a pretty good figure, but, of course, with all Transformers, there is a vehicle mode. So, get into that. First, you want to fold in his hands, then fold up these things. And then you don't have to take this piece off, so I'm not going to. Then you... This also doesn't tab in, just kind of like sits there. It doesn't pose any sort of problem or anything, it's just a little annoying sometimes. And of course, clearances and stuff, it's not very good when you're trying to put that piece into place. And these just flip around, like so. And then it'll tab in on this arm. And then you want to spin the waist around. And then you come in here, and this is very nice because this part right here couldn't have been filled in, but they filled in the leg instead of just making it completely hollow, which is nice. So you want to fold it out on this hinge, and then kind of like rotate it around like that. And then when you fold up that piece, there's a little tab hole in there that corresponds with this. And get that tabbed into place, and you do the same thing on the other side. You know, I looked at the analytics, and apparently 100% of the people who watch my videos don't make it up until this point. So, if you're here, comment cheeseburger in the comments. And if you normally don't watch this long, please try to, because it makes it so I feel better about not making videos that are only 2 minutes long. So, take this and then untab it. And you just clip it together. Fold that all the way around. Make sure it snaps in place, and you got something like that. And you just kind of like shove that in there. Like that. There you have his tank mode. Honestly, it looks kind of nice. I mean, I like the kind of like the hover tank vibe that it has with like the individual pieces. Reminds me of Classics Warpath. It's kind of weird though that he'd have a scope up here, seeing as, you know, he can't see from there, so it doesn't make too much sense. You see it reveals a little bit more detail right here, and makes the tank look like it came from the cartoon as well, which is kind of nice. See, it's just, you know, his feet hanging off, which is kind of weird. This can swivel, though, but because the sword is in the way, it cannot look up. Which is weird, because, like, if you take this out, then it could look up. So, that's what I was talking about earlier with it restricting some things, which does get kind of annoying. One thing that I wish that they did do, was paint more of the treads. Like, only in the front they're painted, and then they're... Actually, wait, no, they are painted in the back. I didn't even notice that. Yeah, they aren't... I kind of wish that this piece right here was painted black to look more realistic. But I always have it, like, hovering off of my shelf a little bit. Nice red accents throughout the figure. As far as tank modes go, it isn't bad, but it's definitely not the best tank ever. And it is a little upsetting because the Earthrise figure appears to be molded off after this figure. So I most likely won't even pick it up because it'll just be this, but again, with a massive sword that you almost have to have with you for it to work. So, overall, it's a good figure. It's very nice detail and everything. It's just not particularly what most people would want. So, this is Soundwave Spear signing out.